Well, good afternoon. Today we just have a very short agenda and want to walk through the member amendments, budget amendments for you. So in your tab, you have two documents. So the first one is this summary document, and just as a note, it has the amounts that are in here as well as lines, and I'll reference those, and also page numbers. So the second part of your packet does have them more detailed, so in case you have questions, we can look at that and go to the subsequent page in your packet, just as a reminder. I think several of you already looked towards the back at the total, so I will start there on page 5, that we do have $3 million in general fund requests for FY23, and then $4.6 billion in the second year. But I do want to note one of the large ticket items is actually on line 67. It's a $2.5 billion request for school construction funding. So if you remove that, it is closer to $2.5 billion. In addition, there are a few large requests that are duplicates. For example, we had 3 requests related to teacher salaries, which are at a much higher rate. So when we remove some of that, it also reduced that request.
Which amendments are
The teacher salaries are listed on, let me pull that over to here. The first one's on line 63, raising it to 11% increase at $328 million. The second one here is on line 79, a teacher salary increase at 10% at $274 million. And then on line 82, teacher salary increase, again, $274 million. So we have some that are, as I mentioned, a duplicate, that are also some large ticket items.
You know, when I first got on this committee, and Willie was the chair, if you did not put in a tax increase submitted with your budget amendment, in front of you, he would tear your amendment up before you get out of the room. That's how he handled it. Guess how many budget amendments we used to get? About 2 or 3.
We didn't have any for amendment.
Huh?
We didn't have many for amendment. For me.
Well, we can do some more of the K-12, but I just want to note a few things kind of more in blocks. There's 2 studies that are directed to the Secretary of Higher Ed. One's a report, but will be a work group on threat assessment teams, and there's been some discussions on that.
Where are they?
They're on line 1, and if you need the specifics on that, there's some detailed information to have the Secretary of Ed, the Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security to work with SHEV and public institutions on threat assessment team resources. There's a second one on the study of child care and the workforce, and that is an amendment to really look at separating the regs for child care of school-aged children from the early childhood regulations. The next block is for Department of Education, and we have about $6.9 million in requests there. Those are from lines 3 down to 21. So essentially the remaining part of that first page are all related to the Department of Ed. As you'll see here, there's several bills that are noted on the right that these are tied to. For the most part, many have been referred to Senate Finance already. Some have actually been read and passed by the Senate. And there are a few that have been passed by indefinitely. And these are the ones on lines 18 and line 20 and line 21. On the next page, starting on page 2, this is funds that's direct aid to public education. And this block of amendments are really more targeted programs, so lines 22 all the way down to 61. So the majority of page 2 and 3, all of page 2 and 3 are very specific programs.
Or what?
They're targeted towards specific programs.
These are typically
And I'll be happy to answer any questions on those if there's some that you see. There are one or two that, if you look on page 3 on line 45 and 46 and 47 related to bills. And as I also want to note, those have been, 2 of them are in subcommittee on lines 45 and 46, and 47 has been referred to Senate Finance. And the last one is related to line 61, and that is also currently in subcommittee. Moving on to page 4, these are this is direct aid. And as we talked about a little bit earlier, some of the larger ticket items are in this section. And I mentioned the school construction funding that is on line 67, as well as the teacher increases. And I mentioned the duplicates there. One is for a 11% increase. That's on line 63. One is for a 10% increase on line 79, and another one on line 82.
Jennifer, you got more than one half of the 4.69 billion.
Chair, that one is a recommendation of the school commission on construction and renovation. We know we're not getting that amount, but we said, let's ask for the total need, and we have close to that.
I'll note a few that are JLARC recommendations, and there's two duplicates here. You'll see it on line 70 and 71 on instructional assistance, and that is part of a JLARC recommendation, and that was part of the one on the pandemic funding, and they spoke last week regarding.
Where was that?
This is line 70 and 71 for instructional assistance. And then another JLARC recommendation that is also included in here is on line 66 related to support positions, school support positions, and increasing funding for those.
On 66 would lift the cap altogether, right?
It lists the cap, you're right, but they had also made some notes, I think, on the support positions as well.
Okay.
Is that right? I'll be happy to answer any other questions related to the direct aid block, which actually goes from page 4 and over to page 5 and ends on line 86. One other one I did not note is on line 65, this is the expansion of the reading specialists as well. Moving into other education, we have some additional funding requests for VSDB, and those are listed on lines 87 through 89. The next area is with the Library of Virginia, the archived records, and I believe this Senate bill that it's tied to has passed the Senate. And the next one is state aid to local public libraries, and you'll see that those are listed twice, and some other technology needs. And the next lines 94 through 96, include the Commission for the Arts. The remaining one is the Virginia Museum of Transportation. I did not put the bill here, but there is a bill associated with that. And the remaining one is, Tyler.
The Museum for Transportation, the bill would make it a state agency.
Yes.
Currently, they are not a state agency.
Right.
Say that again?
Line 97, the Museum of Transportation, Senator Edwards, he has a Senate bill that corresponds. It would make the museum a state agency. The museum is in Roanoke.
Is that something that we should He's had that bill before, and
Senator Howe, I don't know if all state museums have been established that way.
We can look into it.
We can look into it. And last year, we gave money to the museum for
Yeah.
improvements one time.
The remaining ones are actually, those not funding here on the general fund side, but in line 98 was some additions to include regional special education staff using ARPA funds. And then line 99 relates to mid-year growth assessments, which is in the ARPA stimulus fundings listings as well.
Mr. Chairman. Dick, can I ask a question? Do we have a really good handle on the remaining unappropriated ARPA funds?
Senator Newman, do you mean the unobligated education or the unobligated state local fiscal recovery
I was
funds?
asking about education, but I'd love to know the other number too, but what about education?
The education, the state education department, DOE, has obligated them for certain purposes, but they have not been all liquidated.
Mr. Chairman, that means that all of them have been appropriated, but not all used, is that correct?
Correct, and the appropriation authority is given to the department under the budget that was adopted in the 2021 special session 2. But the General Assembly has directed those reserved funds before or previously.
So, Dick, just one more question. Is there contingency funding that we could or should do in case something falls out? In other words, could we think about a group of contingency funding in case the ARPA money does not look like it's going to go?
Okay. Senator Sasla, Senator Newman, yes, the subcommittee could explore that contingency, and I'll remind you, the department updated us and they were using a large portion of some ESSER money for grants to parents and to help their students with learning, but they had to go through a reimbursement process. So the subcommittee could look at that money for
When you look at all the
contingencies.
money that we received, 3 years, how much is left at all the various government allocations? Roughly.
So if
On
you
the-
give me 2 seconds, I'll find that slide.
And are you saying on the K-12 side or just the for total? Oh, yeah, and that was one that Tyler's looking at from our prior presentation. I don't know if he had a total for all three. I think that was one. Well, and again, I think we're getting the obligation. So Tyler, on page slide 5, we had 1.7 billion.
So-
but
Senator Saslaw, about 60% remain for the local school divisions. Remember, the federal government directly allocated them through a formula that we had to follow as a state.
What's that come to dollar-wise?
Dollar-wise, it's a $1.8 billion balance remaining. And divisions have until 2024 for that third pot, the American Rescue Plan money.
Let me ask you, have all the various school divisions across the Commonwealth been notified of this?
Senator Saslaw, yes, and they have updated plans to the Department of Education based on the governor's executive directive to update their plan in December. Senate Finance staff has received all 130 school divisions' plans, and DOE is compiling that information into a report that can be submitted to the General Assembly and their planned uses of the remaining
And
funds.
the money has to be used by what date?
September 2024, it has to be obligated and liquidated 4 months after that in January. Liquidation is the
That would be
spending period.
2025.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And then to follow up Senator Saslaw, Senator Newman, the state's American Rescue Plan money, that flexible funding that the General Assembly has been appropriated, it has all been allocated in the introduced budget. The governor proposes to allocate the remaining balance, which was about 15 million. But within that pot of money, there are still things that have not been liquidated. One of those being the K-12 HVAC projects. Senate Finance staff asked DOE to pull and kind of get information from divisions based on existing budget language on their spend down and their planned uses of that money, so we could update you.
Do you know where the governor directed the 15 million?
Senator Howe, staff has that. I don't have it with me, and I can't remember the exact allocations, but we do have that. Senator Saslow, that
Are we
is,
meeting next week?
Senator Norman, we are not meeting next week.
Do you know how to use email?
I do.
You never give us that. I'm not that.
How the 15
Yes, sir.
was allocated? Yes, sir.
Nothing from Williamsburg. Seems to catch on.
And Senator Saslaw, Senator Norman, not only was the 15 remaining balance, they also, within some of the appropriated amounts, reallocated those based on planned uses by the agency. So we will get you the full list, but that number is larger than 15 once you consider the reallocations.
Put a budget amendment in, like Willie would ask you, got up here, where is it that you put in a tax increase to pay for it? And if you said no, in front of you, you would tear up your amendment until you get
Well,
out.
we have some modest degree of stability between Jennifer and myself, but not really need to be.
Senator Saslaw, that is staff's prepared materials today. If you'd like to adjourn the meeting or continue the
Before we
discussion.
do it,
Yeah, sure, Steve.
Janet, what would you think about us just thinking about, maybe even when we're out of here, looking at a what-if list? In other words, if some of this money's just not going to be spent, and I just think that we ought to
Are
have
you talking about the government money?
the state money, and honestly, we ought to have a plan to deal with localities if they just can't do it. And it just seems like to me, something's going to go bump in the night, and we should have a list of unallotted, or whatever you want to call it, items that we can help out with that money.
All right, that's it.
Everybody here is, I think, on resources.
4 o'clock downstairs.